All right, if we can have everyone's attention, we'll begin the meeting. Prior to the open session, council met for a closed meeting. It was moved by Councillor McCann, second by Councillor Borneman, that pursuant to Section 239(2) and 3 of the Municipal Act, SO 2001 C25 is amended. Council of the Corporation of the Town of Parry Sound moves to a meeting closed to the public in order to address matters pertaining to B, personal matter about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, taxi license appeal hearing, and E, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, rezoning uh, one College Drive. Yep. Great. May I have a mover and seconder for the agenda, please? Councillor Bachman, Councillor McCann, that the council agenda for October 15th, 2019 be approved as circulated. Are there any changes, additions? Seeing none, all in favor then? That's carried. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof? Councillor Keith?
Yes, 7.1, the ratification matter. I'm
Okay.
in conflict due to employment, Solicitor General.
Okay, thank you. Okay. No other conflicts? No? Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're now going to take a few minutes to hold a public meeting to hear any interested persons with regard to 3 zoning bylaw amendments under Section 34 of the Planning Act. May I have a mover and seconder, please, for the Councillor Keith, Councillor McCann, that we do now adjourn the regular meeting and declare the public meeting open. All in favor? That's carried. Ms. Johnson, can you explain how the public was notified of zoning bylaw amendment Z 1914 12 College Drive, M2 Development Incorporated?
Yes, notice was given by prepaid first-class mail to the required agencies, mailed to property owners within 120 meters as per regulations, posted on the property, and was placed on the town's website.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Algie, can you explain the purpose of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment?
The applicant has requested to amend the existing SP 26.88 zone. The property currently permits a 4-story retirement residence in addition to all the uses in the C3 zone, and they've requested to use it as a 4-story apartment dwelling as well in order to provide flexibility subject to reduced easterly and rear yard setbacks and a reduced parking standard of 30 parking spaces for the 60 units. The portion of the property subject to the rezoning is currently vacant. The lands are provisionally approved for consent and are adjacent to the Gardens of Parry Sound retirement residence.
Okay, thank you. So, at this time, does anyone wish to speak in favor of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment? If so, please come forward and identify yourself by name and address. Hit the purple button on the... Perfect. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. My name is Bill Martimay. I'm with M2 Developments. We own and operate the Parry Sound retirement home called the Gardens of Parry Sound. We developed the facility in I think it was 2013. We did an initial 70 suites, and just this year we completed an addition to it of 37 suites. So now we have a total of 107 suites. And we're finding that with increasing demand and also to provide a variety of services, we're investigating putting up a small 40 to 50 unit apartment building for seniors adjacent to our building, which is on the west side of it. We severed the land earlier this year, and now we're asking for the rezoning just to clear up that it allows for a retirement home and allows for some commercial uses. But we think our use is somewhere in between, so we just want to clearly define it, and that's the purpose of this application.
Okay. All right. We don't ask questions during this public meeting, so if that's everything that you have,
Yes.
and then that's good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak in favor of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment? If so, you come forward. well, hang on, hang on. I get to the other point where those that don't want to, but I have to go through this process. So is there anyone else that wishes to speak in favor of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment? Seeing none, then if there's someone that wishes to speak in opposition to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment, come forward, state your name and address.
I'm not opposed to the building. What I'm concerned about is parking for handicapped people. If there's 50 units or 60 units and there's only 30 parking spaces, how many parking spaces are going to be dedicated to handicap permits? Now, I know the government has a regulation that has to have 0.04 for the units, and that only makes about 1.2. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm in the gardens now, and we've had a hell of a time with handicap parking there. There's 18 spots for residents and 7 spaces that's not marked for anything. And out of that 18, there's 2 people in wheelchairs. There's only 3 dedicated handicap provincially approved parking spaces. Right now we have 16 or 17 people with handicap permits, and we're fighting like hell to get parking where we got a handicap dedicated spot. All I'm asking for is if there's 17 people there that's got handicap signs, why can't we have a dedicated spot? Now, they've promised us that, but we've been fighting for about 4 months trying to get it. And if this new building is going to only have 30, make sure the town has dedicated parking for handicapped people over and above what the provincial and federal government and municipal agree to. Because it's not worth it. Like, it's hazardous in the wintertime. You're trying to get across ice, snow, with a cane or a walker or a wheelchair. I'm not opposed to the building, but I think before any seniors residence gets built in this town, they should have probably 50% marked for residents, and then 30% of that 50% should be for handicap over and above what the provincial and federal laws permit.
All right. Okay, we don't ask questions during this, as I mentioned, but staff are taking notes as to what you presented.
Well, I hope before they give the permit, the town has the final say how many is handicap dedicated.
Okay. Oh, sorry, I know who you are, but
Oh,
you didn't
Keith
mention who you were and your address.
Keith Smith.
Okay. Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak in opposition to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment? No? Okay. Mr. LG, have there been any letters received as a result of the notice?
Yes, there has. We had a letter submitted by Faskin Martineau Dumoulin LLP on behalf of Canadore College. They have some concerns as to the definition of retirement residence versus apartment dwelling. They feel that just the general use of apartment dwelling is too permissive, as it could allow any type of person to be living there, and with that, reduced parking restriction for them essentially doesn't make sense because they feel the overflow parking could result onto their property. Therefore, the general term apartment dwelling is too permissive. They don't feel it's good planning, and they ask that a decision not be made until this technicality be addressed or that the application in its current form be denied.
Thank you, Mr. LG. That concludes the first zoning bylaw amendment. Ms. Johnson, can you explain how the public was notified of the second zoning bylaw amendment, being Z 1915-32 Great North Road, Distler, for Ambraska?
Again, notice was given by prepaid first-class mail to the required agencies, mailed to property owners within 120 meters as per regulations, posted on the property, and was placed on the town's website.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Algie, can you explain the purpose of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment?
The applicant has requested to rezone the property from SP 26.109 to an R3 zone. The property was zoned R3 prior to a recent rezoning, and the applicant wishes to return to this zone. Additionally, the applicant has requested a reduced parking size of 2.7 by 6 meters instead of 3 by 6 meters. Previously, the property is used as a fourplex, but this structure suffered a fire. It's staff understanding that a 6-unit residential building is proposed.
So at this time, does anyone wish to speak in favor of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment? If so, please come forward, identify yourself by name, and give your address. Okay. All right, seeing no one, does anyone wish to speak in opposition to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment? And again, if so, please come forward, identify yourself by name and address. Okay. Mr. Algie, has there been any letters received as a result of this notice?
No, there is not.
No? Okay, thank you. That concludes the second zoning bylaw amendment. Ms. Johnson, can you explain how the public was notified of the third zoning bylaw amendment, Z 1916 Macklem Dennis Drive?
And once again, notice was given by prepaid first-class mail to the required agencies, mailed to property owners within 120 meters as per regulations, posted on the property, and was placed on the town's website.
Mr. Algie, can you explain the purpose of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment?
This is a municipally initiated application to rezone the subject properties from R1H to an R2 zone due to the recent installation of water, sewer, and storm services. The properties were zoned with a holding provision to preclude development until municipal services were made available, which has recently occurred. The 20 properties are currently vacant. The official plan notes these lots as being in a residential medium density designation, which corresponds to an R2 zone. The lands described are lots 7 through 15, 37 through 41, and 43 to 48 of M405.
Okay. So at this time, does anyone wish to speak in favor of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment? Just identify yourself by name and address. Yeah.
Suzanne Youngs, I live on Macklem Drive. I just want to say we are in favor, but we do need affordable housing in Parry Sound, so we are for this. Now, we've heard all sorts of stories over the last year since this was all starting that we never really received a lot of clarification what was happening, but we think we know what's happening so far. But with the proximity to the local elementary public school, I think there will most likely be a lot of young families move in. Now, you've indicated that water, sewers, and storm sewers have to be made available for this development, to presume to change to R2. Now, I'm not sure if that includes sidewalks, whether that's part of a development plan too, whether it's necessary for a zoning change. And I'm asking that if at all possible, a sidewalk is put on Macklem Drive for the kids going down to the school. The need for a sidewalk will only increase with more children walking and the vehicles traveling back and forth to the school, parents dropping off kids. It's a very dangerous situation right now for children and adults walking down the hill to the school area with all the vehicle traffic on the street, especially traveling, coming down over the hill. Since the new elementary school has gone in, there have been sidewalks put in on Beatty Street and Dennis Drive and Tudhope, and just this summer, sidewalks have been put in on Isabella. It seems that all the surrounding streets leading to the school have had sidewalks put in, and I'm asking the same be done for the students and children on Macklem Drive. They deserve to be safe also. Even for now, if the sidewalk only went from the top of the hill to the school, it would be better than nothing. So I'm not sure who's responsible for sidewalks. I know the town has put in all the water and sewers and that, but I'm just really asking that something be done, because I walk my grandson down to school and go get him, and it's really crazy. There's no sidewalks. If you walk facing the traffic like you're supposed to when there's no sidewalks, you've got to go down and then across again to get into the school. And there's just too many cars back and forth, and with construction trucks again, it really is a dicey thing down the street. So I'm just hoping that somewhere along the line, I hope the development, I don't know who puts in sidewalks, whose responsibility that is, but we would really like to see some sidewalks put in.
Thank you.
Okay? Thank you.
As I said, notes are being taken for any people that are making, for
Yep.
or against
Yep.
suggestions. or-
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak in favor of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment? No. Is there anyone that wishes to speak in opposition to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment? And again, if they are, come forward, state your name, your address. Nope. Okay. Mr. Elgie, have there been any letters received as a result of the notice?
No, there has not.
Nope. Okay. Thank you. That concludes the third zoning bylaw amendment. The public should contact staff or check the town's website to see if when these amendments will come back for a decision. Council at its discretion may approve the proposed zoning bylaw amendments. If so, it must either circulate notices of passing of the bylaws or give notice in the local press. Objections to the passing of the amendments will be received by the clerk within 20 days from the date of such notice is given, which objections will be forwarded to the local planning appeal tribunal. If an appeal is submitted and the appellant has not provided council with an oral or written submission before the passing of the bylaw, the local planning appeal tribunal may choose to dismiss the appeal. Thank you, everyone. And may I have a mover and seconder to declare the meeting closed? Councillor Bachman, Councillor Horn. You now declare the public meeting closed. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. I'll give everyone a moment that wants to leave to okay. May I have a mover and seconder for the minutes, please? Councillor McCann and Councillor Bachman, the minutes of the regular council meeting held October 1st, 2019 be approved as circulated. Are there any discussions? No? All in favor? That's carried. Questions of staff? Oh, okay. Councillor Borneman?
I think this question is for Mr. Harris, actually. We've had some intermittent conversation at this table. There's been lots of publicity in the paper recently with respect to the wellness pool complex. Mr. Harris, I'm wondering if you can kind of give the public a rundown as to where we are and how we got there and why this route is being taken.
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor, I think there's been a lot of progress made since the beginning of this year. I attribute this success to working together collectively. No one municipality has been dictating a process or the decisions. It's been a collective process all the way through. Earlier this year, the municipalities came up with a plan on how to move this project forward. We've been collectively implementing that plan since then. There's three basic elements to the way forward as we see it. So the plan included first developing a simplified decision-making process. We've got 7 municipalities involved, 2 First Nations. Every decision can't come back to the respective councils, so we've got a decision-making process that all the municipal councils have bought into, and that moves things along quicker. Second, It was agreed that we should be undertaking some due diligence prior to committing significant public funds. It's uncertain at this point what the actual cost of a wellness center and pool may end up costing, but it could be in the neighborhood of 25 million before any grants. We don't think it's wise to commit those kinds of funds until you've done some due diligence. Third, engaging an independent third party to assist with the due diligence. The CAOs around the table are supporting a committee that's made up of predominantly mayors, but we don't have the requisite expertise to undertake appropriate due diligence. So we've engaged a third party to do that, and that work has begun. So the due diligence is currently underway. There's been a lot of discussion about site selection, and we don't need due diligence. Only about a third of the due diligence work actually relates to site selection. Most of the work relates to detailed investigations with respect to understanding what the community needs are, the capital costs, and that's going to depend on what the community wants to see built, where it's being built, the servicing costs. So a lot of the time and effort of the due diligence is to make sure that we have a really good handle on the costs of this facility, what it's going to take to service it, and also a business plan, because once it's built, what will it cost to operate and maintain on an ongoing basis? Before any of the councils can go to their respective councils to ask for their authority to invest that kind of public funds, it's important to have appropriate due diligence. That's underway. The due diligence was awarded to a firm, a qualified firm. I think it was the October 3rd meeting of this council. And that was done after we got approval from each of the respective municipalities as to how they would cost share in that cost. So it's not just a cost that Parry Sound is carrying, it's being shared by the 7 area municipalities, and their work has now commenced. Recently, you may have heard that there's a federal provincial grant funding program that was introduced. It became accessible September 3rd, and it closes on November 12th. There are significant dollars that are available to the 7 municipalities if we can get a grant application in by November 12th. And because of the dollars that are involved, if we're very fortunate, it could be up to over maybe 70% of the project. So we're doing everything we can to get an application in by November 12th. So I think there's a lot of work being done. It's a process that respects that a significant amount of public funds would be invested in this project, and we want to make sure that it's a project that meets the needs of the public.
Okay. Any further questions of staff? Oh, Councillor Bachman.
This is just a comment for Mr. Brown. I'd just like to thank your department for cutting down the brush on the highway near the highway sign, on the Highway 400, the town of Parry Sound sign. And I was just wondering, is there any plan for lighting in the budget for next year?
Through your worship, the lighting of that particular sign is a solar powered system, and it's been there for as long as the sign's been there. It's getting a little tired, so I'm hoping to include that in the 2020 budget deliberations to improve the intensity of the sign of the lights out there.
Thank you.
Councillor McCann.
Thank you. Councillor Beckman's question just jogged my memory, and I guess this would be for Mr. Brown or perhaps maybe Chief Thompson. I noticed that on the old Highway 69, Osler Park Drive, or Osler Drive, the sign that says Parry Sound, population 6,500, looks like it's been through World War III in terms of its deterioration. Who looks after that? Is that something that we can remedy, or is that something that the Ministry of Transportation looks after? Just thought I'd bring that to someone's attention.
If I can answer that question through your worship, that's an MTO sign. So I'll have a conversation with the MTO to see what their time frame is for replacing that sign.
Thank you.
Hopefully after the next census, because we get to change the numbers. Good. Okay. No more questions? Okay. Correspondence, Ms. Johnson.
Thank you, Your Worship. We have just a few items of correspondence. The first is from Bill Liggins with a request for ATS, or accessible traffic signal, at the Church Isabella intersection. This is also the subject of a deputation later in the agenda, and this item was circulated to Mayor and Council and the Director of Public Works. The second item is from Tom Doswell. Mr. Doswell is expressing concerns with DSAB, the District Social Services Administration Board, and suggesting amongst a number of things that budget go towards small business, the budget of DSAB go towards small business. This letter was circulated to Mayor and Council as well. The third letter is from Belvedere Heights Home for the Aged. It is a notice of their annual general meeting on October 17th at 6:30 p.m. at Belvedere Heights, and an invitation for Mayor and Council to attend. And there is a fourth item that unfortunately didn't make the agenda, although it was the intention, and that was from Roger and Olga Little. That letter was sent in on October 3rd and was circulated to Mayor and Council and the Director of Public Works. Their letter had concerns with the speed limit on Wabick Street, with the suggestion of the improvements now making it speedier to go down the street, that the limit be reduced to 40 kilometers per hour and that a stop sign be erected at Wood Street.
Okay. Thank you. Now we come to the deputations portion of tonight's meeting. Deputations are held to a maximum of 10 minutes each, including questions and clarification from council. Deputations and presentations are also subject to the same rules of conduct of members of council, and that no one shall speak disrespectfully or use offensive words or insulting expressions against any member of council, staff, or any other member of the public. When you come, please speak clearly and approximately 1 foot and directly in front of the microphone so that it can be picked up, as everything is web streamed. So our first deputation tonight is Bill Liggins with regard to accessible traffic signals. And could someone make sure that you'll fake your way around there? Right, the chair right there.
I hold it?
No, you're good to go.
Awesome.
Welcome, Bill.
Mr. Mayor and Council, my name is Bill Liggins. I currently reside at 18 Winifred. Been there for a couple of years now. I wanted to come tonight and just kind of follow up on the letter that I had presented, which is requesting that in the 2020 budget that you give consideration to putting the audible pedestrian signals in to start at Church and Isabella. So before I go into a little bit, I want, if you would humor me for a second, let's use a little imagination. If you would go with me and transport yourself to the southwest corner of Isabella and Church and close your eyes. And you're getting hungry, and I want you to try and get across to the fast food place across the street. You're gonna run into a couple problems. Where's the button to push? And what direction am I heading? And once I start across that street, is it safe? And secondly, how do I know I'm going straight across the street? So you come back out. With the APS system, as you may be familiar at James Street, when you approach that intersection, you will hear the beep. And as you find that signal, the button has an arrow that indicates which way you are to go across. And the town's been doing well at trying to put tactile plates in, which will also help direct those of us that have vision loss to go across the street safely, or as safely as possible, and in the right direction. As you get about halfway across the street, the audible signal on the other side of the street will also be making either an audible, some sort of audible sound, which allows you to navigate towards that beacon. Again, so you don't end up in the middle of traffic. Trust me, as a person with vision loss, it's a little disconcerting to be walking along and see a pair of headlights coming at you and going, why are they on the sidewalk? Only to realize you're on the street. So the signals at these crossings, I think, are going to be hugely beneficial, especially if things move forward with having the mega school. You're going to have more children around there. As you'll note in the letter that I indicated, there were 4 children that are currently in the elementary school system. Even if that mega school doesn't go forward, they're going to end up in the high school. And having a safe crossing for those individuals, I think, is paramount, because the consequences of not having them there, like I said, living close to that area, I've had a number of times where it's come pretty close where someone's almost taken out my legs because those cars are whipping along there pretty quickly. There are a number of people in the area. Unfortunately, I can't give you exact numbers because of confidentiality through CNIB, but they were able to indicate that there are approximately 80 to 84 people in Parry Sound that actually have identified themselves as blind or visually impaired. Those numbers, as we know, go up in the summertime with the number of residents. Personally, I know there are at least 4 people in that immediate area, and ideally what I'd like to see moving forward in order to kind of meet the guidelines of the AODA, the Ontario Disability Act, is to move forward throughout the years and budget for the 2025 deadline to try and get the rest of the lights in the town so they're accessible. So that's all I have at the moment, unless someone has any questions.
Councillor McCann has a question.
Yes, thank you, sir, for coming this evening. You're a pretty brave man, because I was hit by a car, not in town here, but in Peterborough, and I was 1 second sooner I would have been killed, a second later I would have been free totally. But I had casts on both arms for a couple of weeks and not a happy camper, but I counted myself very fortunate. So thank you for coming tonight and asking for that. You've talked about the ones that are downtown. Mr. Mayor, I was wondering if we could put forth some sort of direction this evening asking to consider this in our budget for 2020.
Yeah, is there a seconder? Okay.
Was there a hand that went up?
Oh, there's 3 of them. Went
Okay.
Up, so, Councillor Keith. So add the Church Street Isabella to the 2010 budget for investigation, for consideration.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And like I said, moving forward, if you could think about the 2025 timeline, if we can get more in town, would be great. And your comment about being brave, I appreciate that, but without it, I can't get down to go do my curling in the wintertime. So.
Yeah. All in favor of the direction? That's carried. As a sideline, you mentioned curling. He is an amazing curler. Absolutely.
I have had the opportunity to represent Parry Sound at the National Blind Curling. So.
Yep. So. Yep.
I want to ask, do you find that the audio levels at the system downtown is loud enough I mean, this is excellent to have somebody come here who really depends on the use of those systems to hear firsthand how it's working or not working for them.
For the intersection downtown, I find it's fine. And I understand there's a balance between, those that live there and then those of us that actually access those systems. It's understanding where it is and standing close enough to it that I'm going to hear that voice when it says that it's safe to go across. And as Mr. Brown will attest to, there are a number of the systems now are really good in the sense that as traffic flow decreases over the evenings and into the nights, those volumes will go down. So for residents or businesses that are concerned about it, I think there's less concern now that it's not the chirps and the beeps. And personally, I prefer not the chirps and the beeps, because I'm thinking, is that a bird, and is it safe, and which way can I go? So it's quite handy to have that actual voice there, and the volume levels at this point I find are fine.
I appreciate your comment on the chirps and the beeps, because I know in other towns or cities we've been in and heard them, I thought it was the invasion of the birds coming through or something, but that's cool. Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you.
Any further questions? No? Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Our next deputation is Roger and Olga Little, Wabick Street maximum speed limit. Welcome. Microphone's already on, so you're good to go.
Well, it's a good segue from what Bill had to say about, I'm going to talk about Wabick Street for the same reason, for reasons of safety concerns. I think most of you have traveled Wabick extensively, probably, being in the town, and I think most of you know that the condition of the road in the past little while was enough to at least have some measure of calming effect on the traffic, but not always. We spend a lot of time in our front yard, so we see what goes on with regards to traffic going both ways on Wabick. I started to think about this when the road was being constructed, or reconstructed, I should say. And I walked the full length of Wabick, realizing there was no posted speed limit at all. And I was dumbfounded by that. And so I did a little bit of research, and I realized that if there is no sign posted, that it defaults to 50 kilometers an hour. So I know that there's classification of roads with regards to what constitutes a highway or a roadway. But in looking at these classifications, I don't think it takes into account the things that I see and my wife sees on Wabick on a regular basis. I don't think Wabick can be considered Parry Sound Drive in terms of the sight lines, in terms of its width, yet it has the same speed limit. I don't think Wabick can be compared with Church Joseph for the same reasons. And I don't think Wabick can be compared with William Street, or with Bowes, certainly. And so my interest here tonight is in creating, not creating safe situation, in reducing risk. And I think that anybody knows that when things happen at higher rates of speed, there's more uncertainty and more unpredictability and more risk. I spent a lot of time on the road in my life. I've worked for Public Works in urban areas. I've driven truck, urban, rural, and I've seen evidence that pretty much every time I went out on the road. So I went out and spoke with residents on Monday and walked around and delivered the letter that you all got, I think, Ms. Johnson just said, and spoke with residents, and they were mostly supportive. I did have a couple of people that pushed back and said, I don't care about that, or that they were opposed to it. And in fact, one local resident wrote to me extensively on the fact that she was opposed to it, but the individual wrote to me, said that they were opposed to it. The most common anecdotal comment from the residents in Wabick that I spoke to was that people drive too fast, that they're exceeding the speed limit by 20, 30 kilometers an hour. And having been in trucks, I know what it sounds like when a vehicle is doing more than 50 kilometers an hour, 60, or even 70. I even had a resident flippantly say to me, why don't they post the speed limit as 80? I said, why would you say that? He said, so they won't do 100. I also had occasion to speak with Melissa McEwen from the Early Start Daycare. And she told me that the students and teachers there will not walk on certain parts of Wabick due to safety concerns, like the curve just to the south. And that's unfortunate, that they cannot take the kids out on the street without having to navigate a street that does not have any stop signs, no lines for which to cross with a class of 10 or 12 toddlers, young people, and that I find curious and dangerous. The individual that contacted me by email, she was sending me information that described the way in which the City of Toronto decides whether a street warrants a change to a lower speed limit like 40. And I found the information very useful. A couple of the criteria that they use for that is whether or not there's a steep hill or a sharp curve. Now, like some of the bylaws that I've read in the local bylaw classifications, it doesn't really define what a steep hill is, and it doesn't really tell you what a sharp curve is. And I'm no expert, so I couldn't tell you. But Wabick does have a hill that's steep, and in the winter it's icy. And I have seen many, many risky situations with people backing out of their driveways, some of whom, they don't really back out of their driveways in the winter, they more like slide down their driveway to get to the street. Another factor on Wabick that maybe other people aren't aware of, I know there's deer everywhere in the town, but Wabick is particularly susceptible to packs of deer coming off the bay and coming up over the hill from the Coast Guard, going through our backyard and bolting up to Avenue Road in packs of 6 or 7. You know, at 6 in the morning in the dark, in the poor light, it would be very, very easy with the snowbanks as well for there to be a collision and a tragedy that's avoidable. And I'm not saying that 40 will stop that, but all in all, I think a 40 limit would reduce risk. The snowbanks are another factor I know all over town, and I was very glad to see that a stop sign was put in at Isabella and Gibson, because that was an extremely dangerous situation that I had thought was quite dangerous, and then it was only when I spoke to Dan Ball, and he told me that they were in fact going to install a stop sign there, and I applaud that. I know it's probably the aim of the town to attract more people to the waterfront area, and the only way in which they can get there, except on the trails or by water, is to use Wabick Street. Now, in my conversation with the mayor at the end of September, I asked the mayor why Prospect was posted at 40. And the response I think you gave me was that it was out of safety concerns for the people that flock down there in the summer, and they come in quite great numbers. And I can't imagine why that principle would be applied to Prospect without being applied to Wabick, which is the only street they can use to get there. Wabick is a very busy road with a lot of Coast Guard vehicles and especially boat trailers because of the boat launches that are on the waterfront. And I've already showed that there are classes of children walking around there, kids on skateboards, I'm sure will be attracted to Wabick. If I was 16, I would be too, in the condition that looks like it's going to be in, which will be like silk. And one of the other things is that people on their way to the beach, people on the way to launch their boat, are not usually the most vigilant about safety. Usually their heads are thinking about what they're going to be doing when they get to the beach, or to the boat, or to go out on the bay, the cottage. And I think it would be in the best interest of all the residents and people that use Wabick Street and the visitors during the summer, just to post the speed limit and post it at 40 in order to mitigate possible risk to people in the future, children, animals, the elderly like me. I don't know how much a stop sign costs, but I can't imagine that the cost of that would be prohibitive in terms of averting one tragedy in the future. And these are people that I know you know and that you care for in the community. And so that's all I really have to say about that.
Thank you. Are there any questions? No? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. We had one deputation cancel out. If there's anyone else that wishes to make a quick deputation at this time, we have a couple minutes free. Nope. Okay. All right. We're going to reports, and we'll start with Councillor Backman tonight. You're up.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's been a very light week since 2 weeks since our last council meeting. I haven't had any meetings that I was able to attend, and therefore my report this evening is very short. However, I would just like to thank one of the residents, if you're watching from home or will be this Saturday, who advised me to speak a little louder into my microphone. I was very gracious for the phone call. Thank you.
Councillor Warren?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Is that loud enough? I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving weekend. And again, because of the short turnaround council meetings this month, I had one meeting which was October 2nd, and that was the Committee of Adjustment for the town of Parry Sound, and we heard and passed one application. That's it. Thank you.
Councillor Keith?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, fellow councillors, staff, and the public, I have nothing to report.
Thank you. Councillor Burden?
Thank you, Mayor McGarvey. Good evening, everyone. On Wednesday, October the 9th, I attended the monthly meeting of the Downtown Business Association. Each fall, the DBA and the town review and update their memorandum of understanding, and this process is currently underway. Since the resignation of one of the board members a few weeks ago has left a vacancy on the board, the two unsuccessful candidates from the recent election were approached to fill the vacancy, but both declined. So the DBA will look within their membership for a volunteer to fill that spot. One of the members of the DBA board is working on a project to create and maintain a skating rink in the lot at the town dock. This would be done with little or no cost to the town, and all work would be done by volunteers. Discussions are ongoing with the town staff. The upcoming Girlfriends Weekend organized by the DBA, which will take place on the weekend of November the 22nd to 24th, is coming along nicely, and registrations are way up from previous years. This looks like a fun, exciting weekend for the ladies who will take part. On Thursday, October the 10th, I attended the monthly meeting of the District Social Services Administration Board in Sundridge. Things are going well with the DSAB board. Budgets are being respected and adhered to, and new building projects are being investigated. And just in case it doesn't get mentioned anywhere, the Santa Claus Parade will take place on Saturday, November 30th here in Parry Sound. And that's my report.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Borneman?
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, everyone. I've had a fairly light couple of weeks as well. I've had a number of meetings at the airport. The project is moving along, and finally Hydro 1 has come to the table. The costs have increased from what had been anticipated as a result, but at least we have some direction there. The cafe is doing very well for, I think the staff has really buckled down and are controlling costs better than they had been. Fuel sales are more on par with an average year rather than the bumper sales year that we experienced in 2018. I want to thank Brian Tuck, Jamie Tranter, and Nevin Carnarvon, who are retiring from the Parry Sound Fire Department for their years of service. People don't know what these folks go through. It's not uncommon to see them at the town Christmas party and drop their fork and head to the alarm because the buzzer went off someplace. It's a service that is much needed and greatly appreciated, and one that we probably couldn't afford to pay for as a community, but for the volunteers. I also want to congratulate Jason Bailey and Noah Parkin, two of our EMS employees in Parry Sound. These two, without fear for their own lives, dove into the water to try to rescue someone in Burke's Falls back a couple years ago, and are being rewarded with the Ontario Paramedic Bravery Award later in the month in Toronto, so they should be commended for their efforts. We all hear the bad stories about public employees. We should share the good when they come along as well, and that's my report for this evening.
Thank you, and that's very true. Councillor McCann?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council, members and staff, and folks here in the gallery and those watching at home. One of these days I'm going to use my radio voice pronunciation to do my report, but anyhow, I had a very light couple of weeks as well. Just a reminder that Belvedere Heights is holding its annual general meeting, and that is this Thursday, day after tomorrow, 6:30 in the Fireside Lounge at Belvedere Heights. So you have an opportunity to find out what's been going on in the last year and enjoy some refreshments as well. And on the topic of Belvedere and the Friends of Belvedere, just another call out for volunteers needed to help the ladies. Some of them are retiring this month in October, and we certainly thank them for their service. They dedicated many years to working at the endeavor of raising money for things that aren't covered by the Ministry of Health or the levies, and items that make a big difference for our senior citizens living at Belvedere, and in some cases, some of the outreach programs around the area as well. So I think we heard a couple of weeks ago that there's some $83,000 that the ladies raised over the last 7 years, and we continue to work at that, collecting bottles and cans and things from various depots that are set up. And again, I want to reiterate, thank you to the Public Works Departments here in Parry Sound and in Seguin Township, and as well McKellar, for their participation and assistance in this project. So if you would like to spend some time to getting away from your office or desk or home or whatever, contact myself or Elaine Mills, and we'll certainly put you in touch and tell you what it's all about. And you can do as little or as much as you like. So it's the Friends of the Belvedere in need. And so that's my report for this evening, and thank you.
Okay, thank you. Council, staff, and public, October 2nd, I attended the Naturalize It launch. This is a campaign. The campaign is in support of breastfeeding-friendly communities, and the launch was put on by the North Bay Parry Sound District Health Unit in collaboration with Baby Friendly Initiative. And I was given a brochure on the initiative to pass along to the town here, and a sticker that can go on the front door to let people know that this would be a friendly place for ladies and their children. October 3rd, I attended the AMO MOU meeting at Queen's Park. October 5th, I brought greetings from the town to a Deerhorn Lodge conference put on by the Township of the Archipelago. They held their strategy session with the ratepayers at the Stocky Center. Apparently it had been a few years since they had done such an event, but there was a pretty good crowd there of cottage associations, residents, and other key people within the community to participate, which was good to see. October 9th, I attended the first Wellness Center committee meeting of each council's approved representatives. The interim chair is the Mayor of McDougall, Dale Robinson. There were a number of items discussed, gathering of names for the Citizens Advisory Committee, potential names for chair of the council's committee, and site selection, and the meetings will be web streamed for public viewing, which I thought was really important. That way the public, everyone knows what's going on at the meetings and can be updated. October 10th was the Parry Sound District Social Services Board meeting, which was held in Sundridge, as Councillor Burden mentioned. Some other items discussed: the 5-year housing and homelessness plan update, insurance coverage, investigation of a development of new units, and an update on the Mental Health and Addictions Task Force. And that's my report. So we have one ratification from the closed meeting, and that has to do with a taxi license item. So moved by Councillor McCann, second by Councillor Bachman. The council approve application 001-2019's appeal and grant a temporary taxi driver's license, and directs the issuer of licenses to issue the applicant a 6-month probationary taxi driver's license with conditions identified as confidential Schedule A. Discussion? All in favor? That's carried. Council, yeah, okay. Item 8.1, moved by Councillor Borneman, seconded by Councillor McCann, that council hereby proclaims the month of November in Parry Sound as International Month for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. Discussion? All in favor? That's carried. Item 8.2, moved by Councillor Burden and seconded by Councillor McCann. Whereas Local Government Week aims to increase youth and public awareness about the important role of local government plays in our communities, be resolved that October 21st to the 25th, 2019 will be proclaimed as Local Government Week in the town of Parry Sound, and that St. Peter, the Apostle Catholic School Grade 5-6 class visit the municipal office and participate in a simulated council meeting on October the 23rd, 2019. Any discussion? All in favor? And that's carried. May I have a mover and seconder for the direction, please? Councillor Borneman and Councillor McCann. Pursuant to the town's hiring policy, the subcommittee for the hiring of the Director of Public Works position be composed of the following members of council. Councillor Borneman, you're volunteering. Councillor Horn, yes. You're volunteering. Councillor Keith, yes. Okay. I would like to, but I do not think that I have the time to do it. I just, with everything I've got going on. So three enough? Three is enough? Okay, so we have okay. So we have Councillors Borneman, Horn, and Keith. Any further discussion on the direction? Councillor Horn?
Just a question for Mr. Harris. I just wonder if you could outline what staff is thinking about in terms of time frame of this process.
Through the mayor, we've got Alicia here, the HR coordinator, and I thought she might she'd be in a position to answer those questions.
Welcome, Alicia. This is your first time at council.
First time. In terms of time frame, the job will be fully posted tomorrow. Some of the sites that we posted take about 24 hours with a deadline of application of November 7th.
Very good. Okay. Any further questions? Well, Councillor Bachman.
Does the job opening posting go on the town website as well?
Yes, it will.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Borneman.
So I'm glad to hear that this is moving along. I guess I've just always found that once you get three of us, two of whom are employed on a regular basis, and you have some people traveling potentially to do these interviews, that the sooner some kind of schedule that can be rolled out, the more likely it is to fit with everyone's needs.
I will work towards that.
Thank you. Anything further? All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Here we go. Oh, the next one. Okay, we now need a mover and seconder for the next direction, please. Councillor Bachman and Councillor Borneman. The staff be directed to bring back a partnership agreement between the Founders Circle and the town regarding the collection and administration of the funds, including issuing charitable receipts for the donations to the Parry Sound Founders Circle Award. That the agreement specify the funds must be donated to the town, are held in a town bank account, and the town has sole discretion on disbursements, and that the town create a specific reserve for the funds, and that the payment of the award be based on the recommendation by the Parry Sound Founder Circle to the town. Discussion. No? All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Item 933, moved by Councillor Keith and seconded by Councillor Horn. The pursuant to bylaw 2018-6814, section 3, paragraph 4, Council approves Schedule A as attached to the 2020 schedule of regular meetings of Council. Discussion. Councillor Keith.
Thank you. I've looked over this resolution, and one of the questions that has already come to me is when earlier this year Council approved an increase in the remuneration due to the tax deduction allowance no longer being allowed, so that was increased. How can we now justify less meetings and yet basically still receiving the same allowance? Now, that alone is a concern to me when the ratepayers are noticing that really there would be less meetings going on. And I think municipal level is a level where we want ratepayers to be able to ask questions and be accountable and accessible to us. I think that in the event that there are some issues with staff needing to tweak their time so that they can maybe get the agendas out because they may be bigger agendas what they have now, or they need some time, then I think they need to figure out how they can make that work, and I can appreciate that. But when I look at, we have 22 meetings now. If we reduce it to 17 meetings, and I look at just what happened tonight, if we say with deputations, that's 30 minutes, okay, so that's 2.5 hours less. If we had 30 minutes of deputations, which happened again tonight, that's 2.5 hours less that would be happening. And that causes me, again, concern because ratepayers want to be able to have that opportunity to bring matters to our attention. So therefore, that would no longer be the case. We're going to reduce that. We have closed meetings at different times before the regular meetings, and that's going to reduce a number of those closed meetings to be able to occur, as well as education, as well as public meetings that we saw tonight that are zoning. Yes, there is the suggestion that we can have special meetings, but we already have special meetings now. We have a schedule that the ratepayers clearly know that it's the first and the third Tuesday of each month, with 2 months it only being one meeting. But that is the exceptions. I do not see why we need to reduce our number of meetings. In addition, I think by reducing the number of meetings, that means there'll be meetings that are more likely to go to 10 o'clock. And any of us who has been on council for a while and have had that opportunities that go where we see time goes to 10 o'clock, I really question that always longer period of time, so making it quite to 10 o'clock correlates necessarily with good decisions. I don't think that always happens. I think as you get closer to the time, people try to make quicker decisions, and they're doing their best to make good decisions. but you're now under the gun. So I don't think that is advantageous to us, and I don't think that sends a message that we are trying to be accountable to the public or that we're accessible to them. I also think we have to keep in mind, if we approve this schedule tonight, we know that in our bylaws right now, if a councillor misses 3 months in a row, then they have the opportunity to be taken off a council, being on the council. So therefore, if, for example, in July time with this suggestion, there's one less meeting, that means by missing one meeting that month, you could be put yourself into that predicament. I don't know why we would want to put ourselves into that predicament. I think that less meetings does not mean more efficiency. I think less meetings means that we're going to try to jam more information in to a meeting. And then, yes, we may call special meetings, but we already have those special meetings, as I've said before. And number two, I think that we have to bear in mind that some people on council also work full-time. So you're asking people to work, to be involved. You want people to be invested in council, in decisions that they make. But we all know that when you put a long day in, sometimes your decisions, your thinking process might not be quite up to the same speed as usual. So for the reasons I've given, I am opposed to this resolution.
Councillor McCann.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree 100% with Councillor Keith here. I don't support this. I'm wondering, why is the reduction in meetings been, or why has it been proposed? And I certainly would like to continue with the same schedule we've had for a number of years now.
Anyone else? Councillor Keith?
I'm just going to ask for a recorded vote, please.
Oh, okay. Who's deputy right now? Councillor Backman, can you take the chair for a moment, please? Okay. I'm not in favor of this either. Mainly because I think we have an obligation. We have an obligation to the public, and I think that this is reducing that opportunity for the public to come before council, make their deputations, their presentations, and moving forward, this would limit that. So I would prefer to stay with the schedule that we currently have. Everyone is used to it. You know, I don't like using the same, we've always done it that way before, but because, you know, that doesn't always hold true in every situation. But in this particular one, everyone is used to this particular schedule, and I think the public has become used to it. So that's all I have to say. I'll take the chair back. Councillor McCann.
Yes, thank you. You know, and I see here that there's mention that, you know, there are times of the year when everyone's very busy and attending conferences. Not all of us attend all of the conferences all the time. I have a difficult time getting away for them, and and I have to agree as well too. If we have less meetings, and then some of the meetings we have become very long, we do become rather tired. And I think sometimes we sort of lose the sharpness of our minds in making good decisions when you do start to get tired and such. So I really, really am against this.
Anything further? No. Call the question. Oops, sorry, you need that.
So calling in alphabetical order, Councillor Backman.
No.
Councillor Borneman. Councillor Burden. Councillor Horn.
No.
Councillor Keith.
No.
Councillor McCann.
No.
Mayor McGarvey.
Nope.
Unanimously defeated.
Okay. So may I have a mover and seconder to support a resolution that would support the original schedule that we have followed? Councillor Keith, Councillor McCann, any discussion on that? All in favor? And that's unanimously supported. Okay, we're good?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
So this will be-
Do I need to do anything with that one?
I'll get a new one for you to sign. 'Cause this one was defeated.
Yeah.
That's scheduled, but this, so we'll get a new one for this.
Okay, all right. Let's see. Mover and seconder for some direction. Councillor Backman? Councillor Borneman? The staff be authorized to single source the resources necessary to undertake the updating of the town strategic plan in the amount of $17,000. Discussion. Councillor Backman.
I'd just like to more so make a comment.
Yeah.
This is in regards to Red Brick Communications. I've been following them for some time, and I've seen a lot of good work come from them, and feel that they would be a really good fit. So.
Councillor Keith?
Yes, my concern is more, again, the appearance. I don't still understand why this cannot be a request for proposal, some way of an opportunity rather than us just appointing one company. It may do a very fine job, but I don't really feel comfortable with just single sourcing without that opportunity. Maybe that can be clarified better.
Mr. Harris?
Through the chair, one of the main reasons is just the timing. If council, I believe it was at a September meeting that you wanted more consultation, more public consultation with community groups, various community groups, the youth, etc. And we thought the timing was important to get that consultation done and in place in preparation for the discussions for the 2020 budget. And that's driving the single sourcing is the timing.
Any further comments? Councillor McCann?
Thank you. We've gone through this with Belvedere Heights, and by putting out the request there, we did get some interesting proposals. So I'm just a little concerned maybe that and I know time always seems to be a problem. We're always so busy and trying to crunch everything into the little time that everybody does have. I wonder if it wouldn't be prudent for us to put the requests out and just see what we can get.
Anything further? Councillor Backman?
I don't know who this question would go to, but I guess just based on experience, maybe Mr. Harris, you can speak on this. What are other circumstances that we have used the single source process?
Yeah, that I can't recall since I've been here an instance where we've single sourced. So I can't speak to past experience unless perhaps.
Under our procurement policy, there are exemptions for certain types of professional services that we can provide preference to one provider. Just trying to access that now, what those exemptions are. Like one of those would be like auditing or things like that. So if it's something specialized where we feel like the professional service provider would give us something specific that we require as a professional service, then we have done it before.
Okay, Councillor Borneman's after you.
If we were to do an RFP for this, what time frame would we be looking at?
I'm gonna guess, could be 8 weeks. We've got to write it, issue it, have it on the street for 2 or 3 weeks, evaluate it, and then bring it back to a council meeting for award.
Thank you.
Councillor Borneman?
Well, I was just going to say, to me, I get it, and I don't like the idea of sole sourcing much of anything where there's an alternative, but I think council is faced with a couple of competing goals here. We've got a limited management team. We've got and good for him, Mr. Brown exiting. I wish him well, but we've got a strat plan. We're a year into the term, and we've got a wellness complex competing for management's time. In the big picture, $17,000 is a relatively minor expenditure for the town, and I think that if this is important, and I'm hearing that we are being presented with a reasonable proposal, I think if this is important to us, we should get on with it while the getting is hot, because next thing you know, 8 weeks, it's Christmas time, then we're into New Year's, and it's May, and it's summertime again, and we're back here this time next year hoping to ratify a new strat plan. I would hope that that's not the case.
Councillor Keith?
One other comment would be, I concur with the first part of Councillor Borneman's preface there about the various targets that we have going on here, and we have to keep them also in mind. However, I think it's also important for us to recognize that this strategic plan that we do this time doesn't necessarily have to be 3 years. It could be a strategic plan that is 10 years. And if you're looking at a longer term strategic plan, then I don't think rushing into just because we think something's a good price is necessarily the best way to go. And I think practice may have shown us that sometimes it's not always good to be rushing just because we think we only have a little bit of time.
Okay, thanks. Anything further? I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? 2 opposed, it's carried. Item 941, moved by Councillor Horn, second by Councillor Keith, that council hereby approves the 2020 budgeting schedule as set out in the attached Schedule A. Any discussion on the budgeting schedule? Oh, Ms. Phillips.
Thank you. I just want to point out a couple of dates. So there's a revised schedule in front of you. And one of the dates that's changed is the date that the budget binders would be available to council would be on January 10th. So that's a Friday. And then on January 21st, that would be the budget review meeting overview, and the bylaws would come to that council meeting. And also, the only other date to change would be the date that the bylaw to establish budget estimates would come to council. That would be on March 3rd, and this revised schedule is just in keeping with the regular council meetings.
Okay.
So.
Very good. Comments? Councillor Keith?
Just one simple comment, and that is we've seen before where we've established budget schedules, and certainly from the information I read here, I think we realize this is going to be the marker that we're trying to go by, but like anything, it's not written in stone, so there may need to be some flexibility there also. So thank you for all your efforts.
Welcome.
Anything further? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Backman and seconded by Councillor Horn, whereas Council through the 2019 budget approved the development of a comprehensive Parks and Recreation Master Plan, and whereas to the 2019 budget also allocated $30,000 towards skate park resurfacing and expansion, whereas it may be advantageous to wait until the results of the Park and Recreation Master Plan with respect to the skate park. Now therefore resolved, Council put the skate park resurfacing and expansion project on hold. Discussion. All in favor? That's carried. Moved by Councillor Backman and seconded by Councillor Horn that bylaw number 2019-6978, being a bylaw to execute an encroachment agreement with the owner of 5 Gibson Street, be considered as read a first time. All in favor? That's carried. All members in favor of having the second and third readings? It's carried. Moved by Councillor Backman, seconded by Councillor Horn, that the bylaw above mentioned be considered as read a second and third time, passed, signed, and sealed. Any discussion? Councillor Borneman.
This is a rather unusual event, so Mr. Algie's here. I think it would be appropriate for him to explain to the public what we're up to.
Oh, Mr. Brown.
Your Worship, I'd be happy to answer on behalf of Mr. Algie. This is a typical encroachment agreement that we have been coming across more so lately. This particular building has been on the road allowance for many, many years without any documentation and approval from the town, and it caught our interest when the property owner was doing some modifications to the building. So we thought it prudent to get the paperwork done and everything legalized, so that in the future, if they're the next property owner, or in the future, that it's all looked after that way.
Okay. Any further comments? No? All in favor? That's carried. Moved by Councillor Keith, second by Councillor Horn, that bylaw number 2019-6974, being a bylaw to adopt official plan amendment number 3, Smith Crescent YMCA/Wickman, be considered as read a first time. All in favor? That's carried. All members in favor of having the second and third readings? And that's carried. Moved by Councillor Keith and second by Councillor Horn, that the bylaw above mentioned be considered as read a second and third time, passed, signed, and sealed. Discussion. Councillor Keith.
Yes, Mr. Algie, could you come and explain this to council? And also, in explaining it, can you just clarify, there had been the concern regarding if this was approved of tonight, regarding well water and how it might be affecting the Smiths. Can you clarify that, please? Thank you.
Certainly, through your worship, this is an official plan amendment / rezoning application. It's a carryover from a previous meeting where a decision was deferred pending the completion of an environmental assessment. So tonight's bylaws adopt an OPA now that the town is exempted from approval from official plan amendments. As long as it isn't appealed, it will come into effect within 20 days of appeal period being over. And the zoning bylaw amendment is business as usual. It's being done concurrently, and it's dependent upon the OPA being passed. As it relates to some neighboring concerns, an environmental study was completed and found there'd be no impact to the Blanding's turtle habitat just due to the layout of the lands. The town doesn't control or regulate blasting, though. I believe that's largely done through insurance company, and I believe the Ministry of Labor for safety reasons, but very few municipalities regulate it. I'm not sure if there will be any impact to well water. I've never heard of that. And also, there is a great distance of land between the member of the public who spoke out and raised concerns and the subject property. This is just building a residential lot, so I'm not sure that those concerns will come forward.
Councillor McCann.
Thank you. So, Mr. Algie, I'm sorry, the study that was put in effect, that was awarded, I'm impressed that it was done that quickly. It was completed, environment study?
Yes, through your worship. I think they just got lucky in timing. I believe the biologist was in town on another property and was just able to swing by this property and do an assessment. It's also my understanding they were rather familiar with the area because they were involved in another project, so they weren't starting from scratch. So, and it was scoped to species at risk habitat as well, but as far as I can tell, yet the study's done and satisfies all policy requirements.
Okay, so follow up then, so very fortunate then for the applicant, so this puts everything to bed now, this is a done deal, and they're ready to proceed with their plans then?
Through your worship, as far as municipal approvals go, that would seem to be correct.
Thank you.
Anything further? All in favor? And that's carried, none opposed. Okay. Moved by Councillor Horn, second by Councillor Keith, that bylaw number 2019-6975, being a bylaw to amend bylaw 2004-4653, the zoning bylaw, as amended for rezoning application Z1906, Smith Crescent YMCA/Wickman, be considered as read a first time. All in favor? And that's carried. All members in favor of the second and third readings? That's carried. Moved by Councillor Horn, second by Councillor Keith, that the bylaw above mentioned be considered as read a second and third time, passed, signed, and sealed. Discussion? All in favor? And that's carried. Oh, I need a mover and seconder. Okay. So moved by Councillor Borno and seconded by Councillor McCann that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute a consent agreement as per Parry Sound Area Planning Board Resolution 2019-061 for application B04-2019 Parry Sound. Discussion? All in favor? That's carried. Here we go. When does that one come up? After that one? After this one, okay. So item 10.2.2, moved by Councillor Borneman, seconded by Councillor Burden, that bylaw number 2019-6976 being a bylaw to amend bylaw number 2004-4653, the zoning bylaw, as amended for 17 Miller, Walsh, Ben Pritchard Law Corporation, be considered as read a first time. All in favor? And that's carried. All members in favor of having the second and third readings? That's carried. Moved by Councillor Borneman and seconded by Councillor Burden that the bylaw above mentioned be considered as read a second and third time, passed, signed, and sealed. Discussion. Councillor McCann.
Thank you. Then, so Mr. Algie, just for the clarification, then, what is this about?
Through your worship, in a commercial zone basement apartment, accessory dwelling units are permitted above or behind commercial units. In this case, they'd like a basement apartment. It's just a old standing rule. And also, there's a possibility it could be underneath a sewer main, which is also not permitted in the zoning bylaw. They're asking exemption to that. Staff is recommending in favor.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor? That's carried. So I need a mover and seconder for a resolution. I will read it first. Whereas the Wellness Center Pool Committee established by the 7 area municipalities is desirous of enabling electronic participants to vote at its open meetings. And whereas the Town of Parry Sound's procedural bylaw 2018-68-14 does not permit electronic participant voting at council nor at its boards and committees, and whereas proposed bylaw 2019-69-77 updates the procedural bylaw with minor amendments, example permitting council by resolution to authorize as it sees fit electronic participants of committees to vote and making minor housekeeping amendments. Now therefore, council waives the 21-day public notice provision of amendments to the procedural bylaws normally required by provision of notice policy as contained in resolution 2011-242. I need a mover and seconder. Councillor Burden, Councillor Borneman. Discussion. Councillor McCann.
I was hoping Ms. Johnson could help us out with what this is all about.
Certainly, the procedural bylaw is being considered for what's considered minor amendment, and that is permitting one particular committee the opportunity to vote when they're participating, when those members are participating electronically. Currently, the procedural bylaw already permits electronic participation, but it does not permit electronic voting. And the Wellness Center, because of its draw of members from different area municipalities with competing schedules and some residing outside the area and the difficulty for bringing them together, there is already electronic participation happening. And for fullness of representation, we're looking for electronic voting also being extended to those electronic participants. So electronic voting just means the electronic participants respond yes or no to questions and that are put to a vote. This particular resolution is asking for the waiving of the notice period for public notice period of an amendment, a proposed amendment to a procedural bylaw. So currently the public notice provision requires 21 days because the procedural bylaw is considered a fairly major document of interest to the public. Because of the nature of this being simply, the intention is to permit council to be able to make a decision every time it would extend electronic voting. As I said, electronic participation is already permitted in the bylaw. But so the intention is just for this one committee, and that council, if it approves the bylaw ultimately, will then further by resolution permit electronic voting to participants of the Wellness Center specifically.
Thank you. No, that makes good sense.
Any further discussion? All in favor? That's carried. Yeah, we've got bylaw.
That's right. It's right here. This one's here.
Oh, okay. All right.
That's the procedural bylaw.
Do we need to come back to
Yes,
that?
that's one. Thank you.
Okay. So moved by Councillor Burden, seconded by Councillor Borneman, that bylaw number 2019-69-77 being a bylaw to govern and regulate proceedings of council of the Corporation of Town of Parry Sound, its committees and where applicable, its boards, and to repeal bylaw 2018-68-14 be considered as read a first time. All in favor? That's carried. All members in favor of having the second and third readings? That's carried. Moved by Councillor Borneman, seconded by Councillor Burden, that the bylaw above mentioned be considered as read a second and third time passed, signed and sealed. Any discussion? All in favor? That's carried. Okay, so now we have another resolution. The resolution is pursuant to bylaw 2019-69-77, Council authorizes electronic participating members of the Wellness Center and pool committees as established by Resolution 2019-087 to vote at its open meetings. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Keith, Councillor Backman. Okay, any discussion on that? No? Councillor Keith.
Yes, in reference to the electronic voting, the one concern I have is in reference to security, how secure this voting is going to be. Can somebody clarify that for me, please?
Electronic voting is specifically referenced to electronic participation, simply meaning the person is Skyped in, video conference, audio conference, something like that. So it's just the extension in simultaneous communication response to voting. So the member can participate through Skype, video, audio conferencing. When a question is put to vote, they respond yes or no to the vote or raise their hands, and they can be seen if it's Skyped. So it's a little bit of a misnomer to say electronic voting. It's not written communication. It's the simultaneous oral communication.
Not an electronic ballot or anything like that, that you'll see or hear the person actually. So, anything further? All in favor then? That's carried. Okay, I think that wraps that one up. Moved by Councillor Burden and second by Councillor Borneman that bylaw number 2019-6973, being a bylaw to authorize the execution of an agreement with the Corporation of the Township of Strong, Village of Sundridge, Township of Jolly, operators of the Sundridge Strong Jolly Arena and Hall, and the Town of Parry Sound administrators of the Public Offences Court for the leasing of court facilities be considered as read a first time. All in favor? That's carried. All members in favor of having the second and third readings? That's carried. Moved by Councillor Borneman, second by Councillor Burden, that the bylaw above mentioned be considered as read a second and third time, passed, signed, and sealed. Any discussion? Councillor Keith.
Yes, can Mr. Andre Couture come and tell us all about this, please? POA Court Manager. Thank you.
Welcome, Andre.
Good evening, Your Worship. So essentially this is the fourth renewal of its kind with SSJ, so Sundridge, Jolly, and Holler Arena, sorry. Now, we've had a renewal in 2015, 2009, and then 2005. So for the last 15 years, the renewal essentially was always 5% increase per year. Now, we've had a little issue with the decline of OPP ticket issuance, and that has had a negative impact on our revenues in the district. So I approached the committee there in hopes that essentially we could potentially cut that in half. We got it down to 3%. That represents cost savings of about $4,000 over the contract. I think it's beneficial to both Parry Sound and, of course, these three municipalities are partners of ours already through our side agreement. So our intermunicipal agreement with these 19 other municipalities includes the SSJ arena operators. So I think it benefits all four parties involved to keep it there. I did look at alternative solutions potentially to reduce the cost further. Of course, it's difficult because we're dealing with the Ministry of the Attorney General, so there's a lot of security issues there. And on top of that, we're also dealing with the judiciary. They have a lot of say, and Her Worship Muse here is a big contributor with court security assessment. most of the sites that I visited had failing grades. So I did look at the Legion, for example, in Sunridge. I looked at the Legion in Berks Falls. These locations had been used previously. However, they do not provide a secure premises for our sitting justices of the peace. So they received failing grades. Essentially, it makes good sense to say stay at the SSJ. And MAG currently uses it for its criminal proceedings as well. So it entails a lot of cost savings. If we were to go to a different location, we would have to change tickets. We would be dealing with Almaguin Highlands, OPP, and the East Side jurisdiction. Representation there would have to be shifted to a different municipality. And of course, that has significant costs for Parry Sound, and we share 16.22% of the cost with our partners. So I think it's fair to go ahead with SSJ.
Anything further? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Bachmann. Seconded by Councillor Horn. That bylaw number 2019-6978, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council, be considered as read a first time. All in favor? And that's carried. All members in favor of having the second and third readings? It's carried. Moved by Councillor Bachmann, seconded by Councillor Horn. The bylaw above mentioned be considered as read a second and third time, passed, signed, and sealed. All in favor? And that's carried. So, prior to adjourning, I'd like to offer the following information to the public regarding the next council meeting. The next regular meeting of council for the town of Parry Sound is scheduled for November the 5th, Tuesday, 2019 at 7 p.m. and will be held in the council chambers, top floor of 52 Seguin Street. Public access to the building is off Gibson Street. All regular council meetings are held at 7 p.m. on the first and third Tuesday of each month, except January and August, where only one regular meeting is scheduled. Regular and special meetings are now live streamed. Please check news and public notices on our website at www.parrysound.ca for instructions to watch live or to see earlier council meetings. Agendas, changes to the council meeting schedule, and notices of special council meetings will be posted on the town's website at www.parrysound.ca under news and public notices. Prior to a council meeting, the public is able to view an electronic copy of the complete agenda with attachments on the town's website. Just search council calendar and the date of the meeting. Should you wish to receive the combined agenda via email, you may make that request on our website or contact the clerk at the municipal office. The minutes of the council meetings will be posted within 2 days after the council meeting on the town's website. Your TV will continue to air regular Parry Sound council meetings on Saturday at 9:30 a.m. following a regular council meeting. For Cogeco listings, contact www.yourtv.tv. Thank you, everyone, and have a good night.